Hello everyone, and welcome to the final episode of the OptiFish Partner Spotlight, the series that has brought you closer to the people and innovations shaping the future of sustainable fisheries. I'm 𝐭𝐚𝐤𝐲𝐬 from reframe.food, and as the communications manager for OptiFish, I've had the pleasure of guiding you through this journey. In today's episode, we'll explore the vital role of communication, dissemination, and exploitation within the OptiFish project with Stavros Tsitouras from reframe.food. Stavros, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Leah. Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
So, Stavros, let's dive into the heart of today's discussion. What is the role of communication, dissemination, and exploitation, and why are they important for OptiFish success?
Thank you very much for your question, Leah. In Horizon Europe projects, I would like to say that communication, dissemination, exploitation are not just supporting activities, but they're actually essential for maximizing the impact and the results of the projects. Furthermore, I would like to point out that according to Horizon Europe rules, all project partners are obliged to communicate, disseminate, and exploit the results. And this is actually where reframe.food jumps in order to facilitate all project partners for the internal communication, but also for the external dissemination and exploitation of results. I would say that we play a vital role in the project. We are the connecting link between the project partners and the results, and let's say the further audience that is interesting for our activities.
Thank you, Stavros, for explaining the role of RFF and the OptiFish project as a facilitator for other partners. Could you tell us more about these activities and how they are interrelated?
Yes, it's very important to distinguish between these three notions, I would say, between communication, dissemination, exploitation, in order for everybody to be on the same page and understand what we're talking about. So, communication is about raising awareness to a wider audience about sustainable fishing practices. So it's about all the activities of the project, I would say. Communication then is more dedicated to project results. So we need to make sure that all the stakeholders, for example, scientists for scientific results, or technology companies for technology that we're developing, have access to our results. On the other hand, exploitation has to do with the utilization of the project result during and after the end of the project. Our project, actually, we expect to generate a number of results. This could be commercial, non-commercial, and it's very important that those results are actually they're utilized during the project, and as I said, after the project, in order for the project to have a wider impact.
Okay, thank you for breaking down the roles of communication, dissemination, and exploitation. Given the importance of these activities in maximizing the impact of OptiFish, what is the project strategy for sharing its findings and ensuring they make a lasting impact?
Yes, our strategy here is actually strongly connected to the things I mentioned earlier, so communication, dissemination, and exploitation. Actually, in OptiFish, we use a multi-layered strategy in order to ensure that the results reach actually and benefit the right stakeholders. So, the first pillar of our strategy is targeting communication and dissemination activities. First of all, we need to adjust the messages according to the stakeholders that we need to reach. So, for instance, for fishers, we use easy to digest format in the form of videos, webinars, and so on and so forth. For researchers, we publish in open access, or we present in conferences, we're developing white papers. And of course, for policymakers, we need to draft policy recommendations that could be embedded in national or European policies. On the other hand, when we're talking about the general public, we need to apply a different strategy, since we need to actually translate the scientific results into a language that is more simple to understand by everyone. Another important aspect that has to do with our strategy is the use of a plethora of means. So, on the one hand, we utilize digital means. So, for example, our website, social media, electronic newsletters. But on the other hand, we also need to make sure that we utilize in-person events. So we participate in exhibitions, conferences, which is very important to have a personal relationship with the people that we're talking.
Okay, thank you for outlining all these different aspects of RFF's communication strategy. With these efforts in mind, could you now tell us how OptiFish brings together different stakeholders like fishers, researchers, and policymakers to maximize its impact?
Yes, this is actually very important because it's not easy to bring all the stakeholders together under one project. It's actually very crucial for the successful implementation of the project. So in our project, we use the so-called multi-actor approach. In that sense, all the stakeholders like fishermen, policymakers, the public, media, are brought together in order to have a say in the solutions that are created during the project. So by having a say on the solutions, they co-create the solutions, so it's more easy for them also to adapt them in the future. This actually is happening through multi-actor co-creation labs, where all the stakeholders co-create together the solutions and with workshops and trainings. Additionally, we have also the validation and demonstration of the results and the technologies of OptiFish. So based on that, all the end users and stakeholders are able to test their effectiveness in action rather than in theory. So how this happens in OptiFish? This happens actually through our 5 pilots, when all the solutions are able to prove their effectiveness. So demonstration sites and pilot projects allow for fishers and industry players to actually see the benefits beforehand. Furthermore, we are planning to launch the OptiFish Academy, which is an online capacity building program. Through this program, we will be able to train a diverse set of audiences through different means like trainings and online documents, information, and this will actually help us to reach a wider audience and they will be able to have a look at our project results.
So the whole approach of RFF is designed with stakeholders in mind. But how can OptiFish protect its innovations and transform them into real-world solutions that can thrive in a competitive market?
Yes, the protection of the innovations that are going to produce in OptiFish are actually is a very important issue. And as I said earlier, all project partners are obliged to protect the results, or at least to try to protect the results. So in that sense, we apply a very well-structured intellectual property rights methodology, which starts the proposal phase and actually finishes after the end of the project. Before I go into more details when it has to do with our IPR methodology, I would like to point out that it's very important that we also follow the open science approach. So on the one hand, we need to protect the results, but on the other hand, we need to keep them open in order for researchers, for example, to be able to further utilize the results to further advance science. And as the European Commission says, our results and data should be as open as possible and as closed as necessary.
Could you now share more details about the implemented intellectual property strategy?
Yes, of course. So, in a nutshell, as I said earlier, a strategy actually begins early in the project. So what we do is we constantly record all the exploitable results of the project in order to be able to propose intellectual property right protective measures based on the nature of the results. So, for example, for commercial results, we could actually foresee patenting or trade secrets or copyright. And another thing, of course, that is important when it comes to IP, intellectual property, since we're talking about a collaborative research project, it is natural that some results are generated by more than one partner, 2 or 3 partners. So here, as our role is dual. Actually, on the one hand, we need to make sure that there is no conflict between the partners when it comes to intellectual property. And when we recognize that the intellectual property is actually generated by 2 or more partners, we need to make sure to help them, let's say, split the results through joint ownership agreements.
So our discussion has highlighted how OptiFish is transforming innovations into practical solutions. Building on this progress, what are the next steps to ensure the project creates lasting change in the fishing industry?
This part indeed is very, very important because usually in Horizon Europe projects, sustainability is a very crucial part for the success of the project. When we talk about sustainability, we talk actually for the use, what's going to happen to the project results after the project ends. So this is actually directly connected with the long-term impact that we were earlier talking about. So impact is very important for the project. So based on that, there are many activities that we're implementing in order to enhance the sustainability of the project. The first thing actually is the demonstration of the innovations of the project. That means that by the end of the project, all these innovations are ready to be used or ready to be commercialized or close to commercialization, to be more precise. Another thing is that we're strengthening the links between industry, policymakers, and the general public, so everybody is aware of the results, and these results are ready to be adapted after the end of the project. Also, training and knowledge sharing is also very important. So, for example, I mentioned earlier the OptiFish Academy. This academy will be actually available also after the end of the project, so everybody will have the opportunity to visit the training programs. All in all, I would say that co-creation is actually enhancing the continuity of the results.
Okay, you mentioned something about the commercialization of OptiFish innovations, which is something very important. Could you tell us more about this?
Yes, of course. And since this project is very close, is an innovation action, so we need to be very close to the industry. Commercial results are very important for our project. So based on that, what we do in order to safeguard that the results could be successfully commercialized after the end of the project, we have a very structured go-to-market strategy, which includes the development of business model, a market analysis, a competitor analysis. So based on that, we give the tools to our partners in order to be able to commercialize the project, the results after the project ends. Also, I need to point out that besides the commercial results, also non-commercial results are very important. And for them, this is why we have the sustainability plan in the context of our project, in order to make sure that these results also are further utilized. For example, policies could be embedded in national and international European policies, or scientific results would be available for scientists in order to further advance science.
Stavros, thank you very much for sharing your insights and helping us understand the role of communication, dissemination, and exploitation within the OptiFish project. To our audience, thank you for joining us for the last episode of the OptiFish Partner Spotlight. If you would like to learn more about the project, visit our website, sign up for our newsletter, and follow us on social media for regular updates on our journey.